Good morning, Chairman.
Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Regulation Committee on Monday the 11th of May 2026. I am Councillor Thomas Sneath, Chairman of the committee, and to my right is Councillor Carl Edgusagowski, Vice Chairman of the committee. Can I remind you that this meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council website, and with that in mind I would like to welcome members of the public and press watching us live today. As this meeting is being streamed in the usual way, I would like to remind you all that your comments will remain accessible online and may be reported by the media. We have had our usual fire alarm tests this morning, and with no further fire alarm drills planned today, in the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the chamber through the rear doors and through the reception and congregate in the front car park and wait there for further instructions. Can I remind everyone to ensure that their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of the meeting. Also, may I remind you that the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collected by the Vice Chairman and announced by himself. There will be a 15-minute break after item 6.1 to allow the speakers to leave the chamber. We now move on to the formal part of the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absent and replacement councillors. Andrew, do we have any apologies?
We just have apologies today from Councillor Charlotte Vernon with no replacement. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. On to item 2 is declarations of councillors' interests. This is an opportunity for members to declare any pecuniary or other interests related to today's agenda. I am minded that several councillors were unable to join the site visit and may wish to personally declare at this point that they will not be able to vote in those items. Do any members wish to declare any interests? Councillor Bowles.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As you've just said, I was unable to attend the site visit due to work commitments, so won't vote on 5.2. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murray. Any others? Councillor Taylor, please.
Good morning, Chairman. Same as our colleagues, I was also not at the site visit. Thank you.
Councillor Rundle. And Councillor Wimhurst.
Yeah, same as other councillors, I was unable to attend the site visit. Thank you.
And the same as Councillor Bean. Thank you.
It's fine, Councillor Woodruff. I've got you down.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for those declarations. They have been recorded and will be in the minutes. We now move over to item 3, which is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting held on the 13th of April 2026 as a correct and accurate record. The minutes can be found on pages 5 to 11 of the agenda pack. Do any members have any comments or suggested amendments regarding its accuracy? No. In that case then, could I please have a proposer?
Proposer, Councillor Whittaker. And seconder, Councillor Wimhurst, please.
You've read my mind. Wonderful. We'll now take that to a vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Just for clarity, any against? Any abstentions? Those minutes have been carried and I will sign them after the meeting. We move on to item 4.1, which is to approve and sign the notes of the site visit to Anwick held on the 6th of May 2026 as a correct and accurate record. The notes can be found in the supplement agenda pack dispatched to members on the Friday the 8th of May. Do any members have any comments or suggestions to make? No, in that case then I'm happy to propose those. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, please.
Wonderful. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against and any abstentions? With you. Thank you. Those notes have been approved and I'll sign them after the meeting. And then we'll move on to item 4.2. We have a similar action ahead, which is to approve and sign the notes of the site visit to Surfleet held on the 6th of May 2026 as a correct and accurate record. The notes can be found, as previously mentioned, in the additional supplementary agenda pack. Do any members have any comments or amendments? No. In that case, then, I'll happily propose those minutes. And seconder?
Happy to second that, Chairman.
Wonderful. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Those have been passed and I will sign them after the meeting. We now move over to item 5.1. Before we move on to the next item of business, I would like to draw members and the public's attention to the change in today's agenda. Item 5.1, County Matter Application 25/0431/CCC, which was a planning permission sought by Stream Bioenergy UK Limited for a biogas plant in Anwick, was originally included in today's agenda. This has been withdrawn from consideration at this meeting. The application has been removed from the agenda following the request from the applicant. This is after having taken appropriate advice and following consultation with myself in accordance with the Council's arrangements. As a result, the committee will not consider or determine this application today. Should the application come back before the committee at a future date, it will be advertised and reported in the usual way. With that, we'll move on to the next item. Item 5.2, which is a report that seeks planning permission by Naylor's Farms for a proposed anaerobic digester plant and associated buildings at land to the east of Surfleet Bank and west of Woad Farm, Spalding. The report's recommendation is that, following consideration of the relevant development plan policies and the comments received through consultation and publicity, it is recommended that the conditional planning permission be granted, subject to the applicant entering into a S106 legal agreement to secure the provision of a habitats management and monitoring plan, the payment of fees to cover the cost of the County Council in monitoring of the habitats and management and monitoring plan, routing adjustment directing all HGV traffic to access and egress the site only via the A16 junction and the northern section of Surfleet Bank, and the payment of fees to cover the cost of the local highways authority in monitoring the travel plan. I would like to invite Eloise Shibar, Senior Planning Officer, to introduce the report. Over to you, Eloise.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. The proposed development site is located on agricultural land in the open countryside, approximately 5 kilometres northeast of Spalding and 2 kilometres north of Surfleet Sea's End. The site is part of a large landholding that extends to 1,416 hectares and is predominantly agricultural in character. The overall area of the application site extends to approximately 6.8 hectares and would include the anaerobic digestion facility, which measures approximately 3.3 hectares and set within a bunded enclosure, with the remainder comprising landscaping and balancing ponds for the drainage. The applicant proposes to provide a new vehicular access off Surfleet Bank, located approximately 50 metres east of the junction with the A16, constructed to provide adequate visibility splays and turning circles. The main access of the A16 would remain unchanged. Next slide, please. As you will have read, the report is very detailed and contains a lot of information, so I do not propose to go through it all today. However, as you will recall, the application is accompanied by an environmental statement which covers a large range of subjects, including but not limited to noise, air quality and traffic, which have been summarised in the report. The proposed development comprises an anaerobic digestion facility and digestate processing plant. The facility would generate approximately 70 gigawatts of biomethane annually, which would be injected directly into the gas grid via the grid entry unit located within the site. The grid connection would be made by pipeline to infrastructure located outside the application boundary on public highway land. In addition, the facility would generate approximately 8 gigawatts of electricity, which would be used to power the site with any surplus exported to the grid. Carbon dioxide produced as part of the process would be liquefied and transported off-site for use by local food production businesses. The process would also produce solid and liquid digestate, which would be used as a soil conditioner and fertiliser on farmland within the applicant's existing agricultural holding. The facility would process a maximum of 105,000 tonnes of feedstock per annum, comprising of food waste, residue from food manufacturing processes, food processing effluents and fat traps, and commercial fruits and vegetables. The waste would be derived locally, with vegetable waste coming from within the applicant's broader land holding. It is proposed that this would direct the waste higher up the waste hierarchy and save around 25,000 tonnes of CO2 annually, which is the equivalent to removing 10,500 cars per year from the road. Next slide, please. The plan on screen gives an indication of the layout, primarily comprising of tanks and buildings. To the south of the site are the waste transfer building and the digestate processing building. The digestate processing building would be the largest building on site, measuring approximately 62 metres in length, 80 metres in width and 12.5 metres high. The building would be clad and would be either grey or green in colour. Gas upgrading equipment and the digestion tanks would be located to the north of the building. The tanks would be a maximum of 16 metres in height, including the dome, and would be the tallest structure on the site. With regards to traffic, a transport assessment and travel plan have been submitted and expect that the development would generate approximately 11 car movements and 3 HGV movements per hour during the peak periods between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Highways would monitor the transport plan with the developer and, having assessed the traffic data, have raised no objection and are satisfied that from a highway safety perspective the scheme is acceptable. Concerns were raised over vehicles using private driveways and narrow roads to get to the A16. Therefore, a routing agreement directing all HGV traffic to access and egress the site only via the A16 junction and the northern section of Surfleet Bank would be secured via a Section 106 agreement. LCC's ecologist is satisfied that the approach to biodiversity net gain delivery is acceptable and exceeds the minimum required gains of 10% in each habitat type in relation to the calculation. The development would deliver 13.14% area habitat units plus 0.12 hedgerow units and a net gain in watercourse biodiversity of plus 15.29%. Next slide, please. And the next slide, please. These slides identify human and ecological receptor locations. They can also be seen on pages 116 and 117 of the report. Measures have been included within the design of the development to minimise impacts against air quality and noise. These include the distance and orientation of the buildings from the residential properties and ensuring that the operations carried out are under cover within enclosed buildings containing odour control systems. Measures would be included to minimise noise impacts from the development, including suitable mitigations such as acoustic fencing and a noise management scheme. No objections have been raised by the Environmental Health Officer or the Environment Agency with regards to any potential impacts on nearby sensitive receptors. This development would also be subject to an environmental permit issued by the Environment Agency that would impose further conditions and controls to manage any potential impacts from the operation of the development. Next slide, please. Members who attended the site visit will probably recognise this view. This is a view toward the eastern boundary from the western boundary of the site, with a residential property, agricultural buildings and pylons crossing the agricultural land making up the landscape. Objections have been received in respect of the site being located within the open countryside. However, Policy W5 of the Minerals and Waste Local Plan makes provision for the development of this nature to be located away from urban centres due to the nature of the wastes that are to be managed. In terms of landscape and visual impact, it is acknowledged that the development is located within an arable flat landscape and contains tall structures, the highest being 16 metres. However, measures have been incorporated into the design to try and minimise those impacts as far as possible, accepting that there would be a visual impact as a consequence. Those measures include the colours of the tanks and buildings and mitigation planting around the perimeter of the site, which over time would help to soften and assimilate the development into the local landscape. Turning to the report, pages 141 to 146 set out the responses received from statutory consultees and objections received from Surfleet Parish Council and 7 members of the public. The report addresses each of the issues raised in detail and sets out any mitigation measures proposed to address matters raised that are material considerations. Having assessed the application against relevant planning policy and legislation and having considered the principle and need for the development, it is concluded that the proposal, on balance, represents sustainable development. Planning permission is therefore recommended, subject to a Section 106 agreement to secure habitat management and monitoring, HGV routing via the A16 and Northern Surfleet Bank and travel plan monitoring, and the planning conditions set out in the report, with the exception of condition 21, which is replaced with the wording set out in the committee updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Eloise, for your presentation. We have one registered speaker in support of the application, Mr. George Kelly. You will have 3 minutes to address the committee with a warning at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and your time will begin when you start speaking. Please come to the front and make yourself comfortable.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee and officers. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to speak today regarding our application for the proposed anaerobic digestion facility at Surfleet. I have scripted this speech in order to fit into 3 minutes, so I do apologise for the blandness that might occur. My name is George and I work for Syntegra. I am an environmental consultant of 24 years. I'm here to speak briefly about the design, assessment and compliance of the scheme, and then we can address any queries you may have regarding the application. I was the lead for the environmental impact assessment input to the design and the application. Important for all EIAs, environmental impact assessments, and a critical approach for all schemes is this buzzword resilience. And it is a buzzword, but in practical terms, it means sustaining, adaptable, future-proofing, and it makes sense. In this scheme, resilience has real meaning and tangible physical elements. It supports the national and local policy objectives relating to sustainability, waste management, energy security, and climate resilience. The facility has been carefully designed and located within an area that already supports a strong agricultural and commercial economy. Rather than competing with local farming, development is intended to work alongside it and support it. The plant would process food and agricultural waste streams generated locally and return nutrient-rich digestate back to farmland as a non-fossil fuel-derived organic fertiliser, helping to support more sustainable farming and reducing reliance on imported fertilisers. As is noted, the location is considered well-suited because of its proximity to the existing food production industries and the strategic road access via the A16. It allows waste materials from local food manufacturers to be managed efficiently and closer to where they arise. It keeps the waste local and turns it into energy. The application has been supported by our comprehensive environmental statement, assessing all technical matters in detail. The EIA process is not a tick box, and it is designed to help the whole scheme, not just assess impacts. Critically, the technology being used is not novel or complex. It is tried and tested. Design has addressed mitigations as part of the EIA process, hence the remaining mitigation is fully compliant, supported by officers and statutory consultees. The proposal is part of the move towards generating our own energy here in the UK. EIA demonstrated using detailed data and assessment that the scheme is fully EIA compliant. The officer recommendation before members concludes that the proposal accords with the development plan and national planning policy, subject to conditions in the Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for your time and considerations.
Thank you very much for your contribution. We do have an additional gentleman in the chamber with here today, a chap called Paul, who I've allowed to come and answer any technical questions. As having visited an anaerobic digester last week, it's a very complex system, and therefore I wanted all members to have someone in the room that could answer any question. Therefore, if there is any questions for clarification to the speaker or to Paul that's in the chamber, please committee, we will ask them now. Thank you.
Any speakers? Councillor Bean.
Thank you, Chair. Got a couple of questions. So, anaerobic digestion plants, are these financially viable without government subsidies?
I can't answer that, if I'm honest. I do not know. There is a market reason for why we are putting this application in, I assume, and that's what we've assessed.
So without government subsidies, this would still be a financially viable project.
My understanding is that there is a market reason for why this has been proposed.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, if I can add, yes, it is viable without government subsidies, but there are government subsidies available. I don't know what those subsidies are, but obviously the client's partner, Waste Power, they are the experts on what subsidies are available, but I understand that it does stand up on its own without those. Excuse me, sorry.
One other question. I see that you're liquefying the carbon dioxide and selling it onto the food industry. I understand the market for carbon dioxide is extremely volatile. Can you envisage any point when you'll just be releasing that carbon dioxide instead of liquefying it?
The site, as I think has been noted, would be covered by an environmental permit, and that would not be permitted.
I'll give way to anybody else who wants to ask a question.
Thank you. Councillor Overton, then Councillor Hill, please.
Thank you. I was also interested in the carbon dioxide because I think not only volatile, but I didn't hear anybody say there is this business nearby that we're going to be selling to. It was sort of general, oh, there'll be somebody who buys it. I'd like something more specific because I am worried that we would produce it for nothing and it might then upset the financial viability of the business as well. And so it could be quite significant. Obviously, we don't want to be left with big assets and no function. So I would be interested in where exactly is that carbon dioxide liquefied going? Thank you.
I can't answer that, but in truthfulness, there are market reasons for this project, and there is, as you say, it's volatile. It's true. There are demands for CO2 in this country, and this would provide a homegrown, let's, for want of a better word, CO2 production as a useful byproduct of the process. And I think, Paul, you might have some...
Yeah, I would just also add it is a byproduct. It's not the main product of the site, so it is very much a secondary, third, whatever you want to call it, but it is definitely a byproduct. It's not the main purpose of the plant.
Thank you. It is a byproduct, but it's also a dangerous one. So that's, you know, a significant one. So I would like to know that it is actually secure, that it's definitely going to something happen to it, not just stored forever, as we've seen with plastic waste in the past. The other question is that you've got food and agricultural waste going in. Are you expecting to have the food waste from the municipal sites in the same way that we saw at Hemswell? And clearly that's a much smellier business we saw. Thank you.
That is not, at the moment, the project has been assessed, and what the waste streams do not include that, is to my knowledge. And importantly, though, all the handling, storage, and movement is indoors for those type of waste streams on this site.
Except for the lorries, of course. Yeah, so I get what you're saying, but we did see that sometimes the lorries come out uncovered or whatever, and it certainly can smell then. So I understand that's about management. But I think the key point we're getting at is that it seems to be a lot of lack of clarity. You're not sure which materials are going in, and you're not sure where some of the materials are going out. And it would be nice to be a bit clearer on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Go on, Paul. Yeah. Chair, sorry. Through the chair.
Thank you. Sorry. It's a developing project in the sense that, excuse me, sorry. Sorry. Initially, we envisaged most of the waste coming from food manufacturing, but as time goes on, obviously you're aware of council's responsibility to dispose of household waste. So we do see more and more household waste going to the site in the longer term, but in the short term it will be primarily food waste from manufacturing, etc. That's my understanding. And again, I'm not waste power. I'm not the
Well,
expert.
What I would like to add there is that the waste streams that we have assessed were very clearly identified in terms of volume, in terms of the trip generations and how they were to be managed. And part of the EIA's job is to assess a reasonable worst case. And that is why the project has been designed as is, to minimise any handling, storage or movement of material within the site that would be off-site. And that's what the odour assessment has assessed, a worst case in this reasonable scenario. If that makes sense. The worst case has been assessed as part of the EIA, and the odour assessment resulted in no significant environmental effects as a result of that. And it does come down to operation, but that's why maximising the amount of indoor controlled management is the way forward for this site, and that's how it's been designed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
I've got a few questions, but just on that theme, I'm quite interested in the geographical footprint of where the material is coming from. And can you clarify, is it all coming from manufacturers, or will some of it be coming from local farms with their waste? So just clarify the geography of the catchment area of where it's coming from, and is it all exclusively from manufacturers?
It's not exclusively from manufacturers. It is not exclusively for manufacturers based on the waste streams that we've assessed.
Can you give a percentage?
Off the top of my head, I cannot, I'm sorry. Again, I stress that the environmental impact assessment is actually, the environmental impact assessment process goes beyond permitting. It has to assess greater worst case scenarios than you would get a permit for this site, for example. And we've had to look very carefully at a larger area of potential waste streams to inform not only the traffic assessment, but also the odour and noise and air quality controls as part of the assessment. So although the waste streams are not necessarily what will exactly happen in maybe 10, 15 years' time, there are also controls in place which we have to maintain every year with the highways and environmental health to keep to monitor what is going into the site.
So are we talking about the whole of the South District area, the Spalding area, or half of Lincolnshire? Or can you just give, because obviously you know the tonnage, and your business plan will have actually estimated what the tonnage will be. So that must mean your company has some idea as to how far the reach will be for this site.
To give a meaningful answer, probably the best thing would be to look at the mapping in the EIA. But in general, the EIA has looked at the worst case volumes that the site could take, and all other controls are down to highway management.
So
I can't give an exact answer of the full catchment.
Are we talking just in the Spalding area, or are we talking wider?
It was supposed to be for Paul. I don't know if you know exactly, but it is local waste.
Yes, it is predominantly local waste, but it potentially has the potential to be wider, yes. There is a figure, and I'm desperately trying to find it in the documents. It's in the highways. Yeah.
The next question is visual impact. Obviously, we've got some large buildings there, biggest of which will be 16 metres, and so there's some very large buildings. So I'm interested in the screening that is talked about in the application. Can you just describe what your thoughts are? Because obviously you can't screen all of it, but what are the thoughts as how you can do your best as to reduce the impact?
So as part of the input to the design, we had to look at what landscaping approaches were going to be best for minimising visual impact. So the scheme includes very large bunds, which are then form part of the biodiversity enhancement approach as well. And there is comprehensive tree planting, and the visual impact assessment had to assess not just in 15 years' time when the trees are fully grown or it's established, but we have to look at the scenarios at the very beginning. And the impact assessment conclusions were that there would be an impact, but of a local and not adverse nature.
Okay, thank you for that. And the next one is in terms of the food, veg waste. I remember because in what used to happen years gone by, that used to be fed to cattle and animals, and then that's how it was recycled. Huge amounts of water. So just technically, can you give some confidence that the huge amounts of water which will be produced, because vegetables are mostly water actually. Just an overview of how you're going to cope with all that, and where you're confident that the excess water will be safely disposed of.
The anaerobic digesting process is water demand heavy, which is why the scheme's been designed to store water on site, and modern technology for anaerobic digestion recycles all the water wastage within the site. So the production of the biogas results in, requires the water-based dissolved organic element, which is digested. The result is the biogas, the CO2 and water that is stored and treated on site and reused in the process. So the actual water demand from off-site would be minimal.
Yeah, what I'm saying is the wastewater from the vegetables.
It's used.
Are you clearly saying that it'll all be used on site?
Yes.
All of it? All the water.
The anaerobic digestion requires quite a heavy demand use.
So there'll be no excess water going anywhere else?
No, it'll be treated
From
on
all this
site.
vegetable?
Treated on site and reused. The anaerobic digestion process has to be quite dilute for it to work. So there will be a need for water that's stored on site to be used to make sure it's not so concentrated. And that water that is left at the end of the process is stored, treated and reused in the process.
But where I'm coming from is there is a constant stream of vegetables,
Yes.
i.e. a constant stream of water. So
Yes.
you'll have water on site, which, I mean, I'm
Yeah,
actually quite very supportive of this process,
yep.
but you're saying that all the water that keeps coming in, which is in the vegetables, will somehow all be used and never go off-site?
There are the other solids that are waste streams which are used will need to be diluted as part of the anaerobic digestion process. So there is always a need for water.
Oh yeah, I understand that,
Yeah.
but you're talking about huge volumes of water.
And that's been included in the calculations for the process and for storage on site. And there is always the emergency overspill, which goes to the surface water drainage system, which is then treats on site. So it's all interconnected. So the drainage scheme deals with the stormwater and has capacity for managing any excess water from the process. I doubt, based on the way the scheme has been designed and the wastes being used on site, all water that comes into the site from vegetables,
Which are mostly water.
which are mostly water, there'll be sufficient capacity for storage on site and to reuse that water. So if you've got one carrot that is, let's say it creates a litre of water, let's go simple, 1 carrot, 1 litre of water, half a litre will be also used to dilute the other food waste coming in. At the end, there is going to be some excess water, but that water can be used for the next process as it's in a circular approach. Maybe I'm not explaining that very well. I'm not a chemist. But
I understand the
the scheme has been designed to be able to have sufficient storage for any excess water as a result of the process and stormwater. So, and there is a discharge from the site, which will be agreed with the IDB.
Well, that's what I'm sort of getting at.
Oh, okay, right there. In that case, there is a discharge off-site of treated water with the IDB.
Right.
Into the drainage system.
I mean, obviously, we'll ask the officers later, but presumably that's in the report. And
that's in the report, yeah. So one of the
agency are happy with.
Sorry, that makes sense. I understand. So the process will use most of the water, but there is also a drainage strategy in detail, which has been approved in principle, which does have a discharge off-site.
Yeah, I think I beg to differ. I don't think it's going to use most of the water, because that's impossible.
Thank you. Councillor Bean? Oh,
Paul, do we have an answer?
Just briefly to add, that's our understanding, that's our advice from Waste Power, that most of the water will be used on site, if not all of it, most of the time. There will be occasions when some water needs to be discharged, but it will be treated effectively. That's our understanding from Waste Power, the guys who are going to be operating the plant.
thank you. Councillor Bean, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for indulging me again. So, the digestate, when it's delivered to that, you say it's all going to be handled internally inside the reception building. So all vehicles will be sheeted or sealed until they're inside that building, and then they'll be sheeted and sealed again before they leave that building.
That's part of the management approach, yes.
Thank you. And will you be storing the digestate at all on site?
There is a digestate storage system which is closed.
Right. And how long do you plan to store the digestate on site for? Because I'm thinking about the possibility of flies, and a fly's lifespan is anything, a life cycle is anything from 8 days to 14. So really, you don't want to be storing it longer than 8 days, or you're going to have a fly problem.
My understanding is that obviously flies are a big issue, and the way our system has been designed is that that will be enclosed as well, the storage of that.
Right, okay. Thank you very much. And then, let's go back to the byproduct. So you've got the solid byproduct, which is a fibrous material, and you've got the liquid byproduct. And where are you planning to store those?
There are storage facilities on site for those.
Yep. And how are you going to control the fly problem with regard to those?
I believe, again, that is storage enclosed. And
Enclosed
also,
storage.
operational management-wise, that material, the solid waste, is a valuable fertiliser, organic fertiliser, which will be used in the local area by the farmers.
Yes.
But when it's on site, I believe the system has been designed to store on site appropriately, so that will be enclosed as well.
So what I'm looking for is that there's a guarantee that there'll be no open air storage.
I believe that's the case.
Paul, do you have a...
Sorry, just to add to what George said, yeah, all materials will be contained within the 2 storage buildings. There's a negative pressure system inside those buildings which extracts the odour and also has insect control with that system. It's I believe the company's called Contraire that supply the extract ventilation system, etc., which we've got. It's in the planning documents.
Thank you. That's all I've got for now. There is something else, but it's just escaped me for the moment. If I remember, I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Overton.
That discussion's been very helpful, thank you. So there is some waste water which will be leaving the site after it's been treated and going into the ordinary drainage system into the rivers. So I am interested in whether the Environment Agency have put any limitations on the amount of nutrients that can be in that water as it's put into the rivers. And secondly, we had some assurance that all of the storage will be in these sealed tanks that are listed here, not in open lagoons. Just further assurance on that basis. Thank you.
To address the 2 points, first one about the discharge, that's heavily managed by the Environment Agency, and we would have an environmental permit for that as well. And in terms of we don't have any, the way I can describe it, we don't have any dirty lagoons as part of the scheme.
Thank you. Is that everything, Councillor Overton? Yeah, thank you. Do we have any more questions? Councillor Hill, please.
Just briefly on the lighting issue, but obviously, will it have to have lighting on all the time? I know it's talking about dimming the lights, but obviously in a very flat, open landscape, is it possible to can you do even more to minimise the lighting, or indeed have it off when people aren't about?
The facility does operate 24/7, so we can't turn it off. And our detailed lighting assessment has met all the requirements to totally minimise the amount of lighting, and the lighting is, modern technology is amazing that it is very, very low level and directed into the scheme itself as opposed to any overspill. In terms
I appreciate it's 24 hour,
yeah.
but obviously at night I'm assuming there'll be one or few people in an office monitoring the equipment, and there won't be people normally wandering, looking at. So I just wonder why there's need for any light at all at night when the thing's just doing its stuff and there's got minimum
I think
observation.
the lighting is down to sort of health and safety guidance of the minimum amount of lighting available for allowing entry and exit from the site and for its operation at night time. So it's heavily managed in terms of the amount of lighting.
I didn't think HEVs were going in at night. Am I wrong?
Not HGVs, in terms of the any operational requirements, emergency services, for example, needing to come into the site.
Yeah, well, lights can be switched on for that purpose, can't they?
Yes, I'm trying not to make stuff up in this, but the lighting scheme has been designed in terms of all the guidance, so that's all I can say at the moment. It's been totally minimised because it has to be.
It's not to have it on when it's not needed.
I can't answer or say that that could be the case. Yep.
I think, Paul, do you have a answer to the question? Can you just press the button so we can hear you?
I had, sorry, I thought I had, but yeah, apologies. Apologies. So yeah, I have two answers. One on the input material trips, which you asked the question about, which I can come back to. Lighting-wise, it is all on movement detection. So literally at night time, there will be very little lighting. So the way the plant works is most of the action, material sorting, etc., happens during the day. The AD plants obviously carry on working overnight, and there's skeletal staff on site overnight to look after those in case there's an emergency. So in theory, there shouldn't be, all the light is on movement detection, so it should be pretty dark most of the time. That's the lighting side. So I can read from the transport statement, I can read this out. So the input material trips. The AD plant will consume approximately 80,000 tonnes of food waste feedstock per year. The food waste to be delivered with an amount of packaging, which is estimated to weigh an additional 3,000 tonnes per annum. The 33,000 tonnes of food waste with packaging will be delivered to the AD plant 365 days of the year using HGVs carrying 28-tonne loads from sources within a 50-mile radius of the site. The delivery of the feedstock will therefore generate two-way HGV traffic flow of 16.2 throughout the year, and that is a worst-case scenario. The reality is 50, but the reality is it will be much less than that. That's the worst-case scenario, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last bit about how many journeys. What did you say? Because I'm thinking that if it's not working at night, then the total number of journeys must be per hour during the day.
I think it's 11. I'm just trying to find the chart, but there is again in the transport statement there is a section that deals with number of vehicle movements per day, and I think you covered it in your statement as well. Sorry, otherwise you actually covered it in your statement how many vehicle trips there would be, peaked hours, etc. I'm just trying to find it. So this is like a 70-page document I'm trying to flick through while you're asking questions. Apologies.
So I think we can get officers to answer some of these questions. And so they are clarification questions. So just keep them on to what was said, please.
Just to be clear on the question, I understood that there was a number of vehicles per hour. I think it was 11 per hour. But if it's not operated, if no vehicles are coming at night or very few, then clearly the actual amount will be double because it's all during the day. So the question is, how many vehicles per hour can people expect when it's operating during the day at its worst case? Thank you.
I can answer that. The trips that are generated per hour is for those times during the day. It's not. It's the numbers are correct.
Just reading from the transport statement, it's 33 HGV movements per day. In the peak hour, there would be up to. Sorry, let me just scroll down. Yeah, in peak hours there will be up to 11 car and van movements and around 3 HGV movements per hour in a 12-hour working day. So 3 per hour.
Thank you. Councillor Bean, please.
Thank you, Chair. Last question, I promise. Worst case scenario, if this doesn't prove to be viable and the plant goes out of business, who's paying to remove it all and return it back to farmland? And Where is that money coming from?
It's not something I can answer other than the landowner would be responsible for what's on site.
Thank you. I think, Paul, if you've got a...
I was just going to add, I mean, obviously our clients wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't viable, if they didn't think it was viable. I understand your question completely, but yes, it would be their responsibility to clean the site up. It's a significant investment, and I would hope that it would be successful. Yeah, we wouldn't be, I know, there are never any guarantees in anything at the moment, unfortunately. Yeah.
Thank you, members. One more, then we better let them go back to their seats. Thank you.
Just, I mean, obviously, I see there's the fire authority is part of the county council has objected, but then can you just clarify that their objections? I mean, I will ask the officer, but from the applicant's perspective, have their concerns been addressed, or have you think you've addressed them?
They've been addressed that we've committed to providing the hydrant on site, which is the precautionary approach that the fire service would want us to take, and that's been committed to.
Perfect. I think Mr. Kelly and Paul have answered a lot of clarification questions. I think the officers are going to have a bit of an easier afternoon. Can I thank both of you for your answers, and it's nice you've returned back to your seats. Thank you. We'll now move on to the main debate. Vice Chairman, do we have any members wishing to speak?
Any members wish to speak? Councillor Hill, please.
Yeah, so I suppose the first thing is in terms of, I think the fire authority is confident, they're happy now, so I just wonder why it says they've objected. It doesn't actually say objection withdrawn.
Yep, so the fire service are satisfied. It is still there as an objection, purely because whilst the applicant has addressed that they are committed to installing the fire hydrant in spec of the fire authority's standards, it hasn't yet been carried out. This has been included in the planning conditions as a pre-commencement condition, so this will need to be done before development starts.
Next one is, obviously, in terms of the visual impact, and I really want to get the justification from in the report. Officers are saying there'll be no, obviously there's going to be screening, but you can't, it's impossible to screen something 16 metres high, or not one thing, several things. So the report states that there will be no major visual impact. Well, sorry, I mean, this is a flat landscape. At the moment, there's nothing there, so it will be very, very visible. So I just wonder, and the issue is now we've learnt that potentially it could be 50-mile radius, and obviously the reason this the recommendation is for acceptance is the fact that it is an AD plant, which is for which is a good thing. But I suppose the question is, and in the report, and I can't find it at the moment, it sort of says, well, there are, I mean, one of the issues for exceptions from building in the open countryside, there is no viable alternative. So I suppose what I'm asking the officers are we saying within a 50-mile radius, or in the Spalding area, let's say, there is nowhere on an industrial estate which could be used, or things like that? Or are we just saying, because we've also learned it's not going to be exclusively from the land of the landowner, it's going to be from factories and all the rest of it. So I suppose the principle there is how do you justify building on and losing agricultural land, valuable agricultural land, where potentially there could be another. And I see on the waste plan, we're saying, well, it's not in the current waste plan, which is probably understandable because that was a long time ago, but it's not even going to be as part of a emerging waste plan, which doesn't seem to be addressing it. So I suppose there's a principle here that if we are going to be having, there will be more of these, of course there will. What is the planning policy framework we're looking at? Are we just going to say wherever they are, that's okay? Or is there going to be some issue about where these very large sites should be put? And is it a question that it should be put on an industrial site? So I suppose that's the question to officers, because you can't say it's going to have a minimal impact, because it obviously will. And I say I'm very much in favour of this, this technology, but it obviously will have a massive impact on that area. It's flat, you'll see it for miles. I know we're going to have a monstrosity at Dowsing coming along, and of course then you're into cumulative impact as well. So I'm not sure the report adequately addresses the issue of visual impact and suitable alternatives.
Okay, so in terms of the visual impact, so the report does say that the buildings themselves will be coloured in a way that will try and assimilate it into the surrounding area. You will be able to see them. It's, as you say, it's a flat land, it is going to be visible. But the colour of the buildings is going to help to reduce that impact. In addition to that, there is a significant amount of planting all the way around the site. On the western boundary, there is a very wide belt. I don't know if we can get the slides back up, can we, Andrew, with the site proposal plan. Yeah, so on that plan there, so all of the circles around the site are trees, and as you can see on the western boundary, that is sort of proposed to be a wooded area, so it'll be a lot more dense. So from that view in particular, you shouldn't be able to see too much of the site. I think in terms of its suitability for location, it is right on the A16, which is another reason why I believe the applicant has proposed to put it there, because it is on the main A road in that area. So it shouldn't, in terms of traffic movements and things like that, it shouldn't have a massive impact on the locality, because of that that network is able to sort of swallow up those extra vehicle movements.
My point was, I haven't got an issue with the traffic. I think that's, but the issue is, if somebody wants to build a factory on that site, I presume we'd be saying, the planning authority was saying, no, we've got industrial estates which are perfectly adequate for that purpose. So the question I'm really asking is, in terms of our policy, because we're probably, are we setting a precedent here? I'm not sure whether we've had, obviously I wasn't on planning before, but are we saying it's sort of open season if you call yourself an AD plant, or if you've got an AD plant, you can put it where you like, because it's the recycling or the environmental consideration to override everything? Or and I think it's very important we get this bottomed out, because otherwise, if we just give permission, anybody, they'll be everywhere, might be, or are we saying, well, they won't be everywhere, they'll only be in specific areas? Because when we do quarries and things, we say, well, we're only allowing them in certain areas. We're not doing that with this, and I just think that, to me, is a bit of a problem.
So, obviously, any future applications will be considered on a base-by-base situation. With respect of the policy, so policy W5 is a specific policy relating to anaerobic digestion within the Lincolnshire Minerals and Waste Local Plan, and that the reason that allows for them to be placed within the open countryside and not necessarily on an industrial landscape is to have it so that it's located close to the feedstock that's going to go in. So obviously where this site is, it is surrounded by arable land, and that's where
But it's coming, a lot of it's coming from factories, not from, I mean, it's going to be both. Coming back to the point, it is an industrial process, and are there going to be no constraints on where they go? Because otherwise, you know, I don't think you're not really answering my question.
But those factories are, some of those factories are located within that area as well. I know they've mentioned up to 50 miles away, but that is up to 50 miles away. But there are...
Yeah, but policy D5 from memory, and correct me if I'm wrong, does say if there are no suitable alternatives. Is that correct? I think. I might have got that wrong, but I thought when I read it, it said it should, you can put them as long as there are no suitable alternatives. I'm sure that's somewhere in there.
It says as long as there is a suitable standoff distance from any sensitive receptors.
I read it somewhere. I'm sorry, I can't find it now, but It's definitely in there somewhere. So could we have some clarification on the? It's policy D5, isn't it?
It's policy W5.
WD5.
Yeah, it's here. Do you want to? No, it's not. Sorry.
Are there any other questions while officers have a quick look? Oh, Councillor Bean.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm just wondering if we can get a further 106 agreement to ensure that no handling of the digestate takes place outside of the reception building, that all vehicles are sheeted before they enter and before they leave that building.
Yeah, that can't be included as a Section 106 requirement, but the sheeting would be required under a planning condition.
And one other is going back to the worst case scenario where this business fails. Is there any kind of agreement we can put in place to ensure the money is actually available to get rid of this plant and return the land back to farmland? Because obviously, if the company running it goes bankrupt, they won't have any money.
Yep, no, there isn't a mechanism in place to be able to do that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whittaker, please.
Along the same lines as Councillor Bean, if in 15 years' time they find something new rather than ADs, then there'll be a possibility that the AD plant will shut down and something else will start up. So basically the same question, where does the money come from to take the plant down? Thank you.
So the applicant wouldn't be expected to remove the plant. That's their investment, that's what they've built. So if it fails, then we will still have that on the landscape. There would be the opportunity, I guess, if they wanted to sell it or use it for another purpose. But there wouldn't be a requirement to remove the development.
So in possibly 100 years' time, it would be like Bass Maltings in Sleaford, falling down as a wreck and an eyesore to the countryside.
Thank you. Councillor Overton, please. Yep.
I just wondered if we could have that policy up on the screen, please, so we can all see it. I'm looking for actually there's several, isn't there? There's the National Planning Policy Framework, which also requires development industrial development to be on industrial sites as a first preference. And then there's that policy, and then there's also, as was mentioned, the W5. So I'd just like to see those. I'm searching on my computer here, but it'd be easier if we could all see it at the same time. Thank you.
I'm not really sure that it's possible for us to start putting up various policies. The policy in terms of the National Planning Policy Framework, there isn't a specific policy that relates to anaerobic digestion units. In relation to policy W5, that sets out that there are circumstances for certain developments that require a countryside location, and an anaerobic digestion plant is one of those for a number of reasons. In terms of precedents, so there has been, since this local plan was adopted back in 2016, there's been a number of applications for anaerobic digestion plants that have been in the open countryside. So any sort of concern about any precedent, well, that's already been set. It's accepted that these developments have to go in the open countryside. What we need to assess is the environmental impact for each one of those. So the principle of the location is acceptable. What we need to look at for each one is whether there's any environmental impacts associated with that particular proposal that makes it unacceptable. And your officers have judged in terms of landscape, drainage and all the other sort of environmental issues that this development is acceptable in this location. and that's the basis for the recommendation.
Thank you very much. I have now found the policy, be pleased to know, so I can see what it says. And certainly I know our national planning policy framework requires us to put industrial development, which this is. Yes, there's no set policy for biodigesters, but this is industry, and there is a policy for industry. And it does say that industry should be on industrial sites first as a preference. Then if possible, so if it wasn't possible, okay, but we do have available industrial land. Then there's the points on W5, just reading, which I'll need my glasses for, saying planning permission will be granted for anaerobic digestion, blah, blah. And then on land which constitutes previously developed or contaminated land, existing industrial employment land, redundant buildings. And then it says, so that's where we're saying that accords with the National Planning Policy Framework. Then it goes on to say land associated with existing agricultural processing, and that's where you're hoping to hang this on. When we did the site visit, and I did specifically ask, and they said, well, this landowner has some 4,000 acres, I think it was, no more than that, and therefore they will need this, that's what it's for. Now we find, and perhaps if we questioned more closely earlier, now we find that this waste is not specifically for that farm at all. It's for other industrial developments, and indeed it could be even municipal waste from households, or it could be up to a 50-mile radius, which is not in keeping with policy W5, part 2. So I do think there is an issue here, actually. Thank you.
I think in terms of, there's a slight confusion, I think, in terms of the waste. The waste was never expected to come from this farm unit. There was always the intention that the waste would be brought from outside of the farm unit. So that sort of part of your argument sort of falls away because that was never the intention. The association with the farm unit is the digestate that will be produced from the anaerobic digestion process. That will be used on the farmland, and that's the reason why it has this connection to the agricultural unit. So it's not the waste that's being generated, because that's always was expected to come from beyond the farm units, from other commercial or other agricultural operations. So that's the the argument that the waste was expected to come from the farm unit. That was never the case.
Sorry, I thought you meant the material to go in the biodigester was going to come from the farm, but I guess that's not the case then.
Thank you. Councillor Hill, please.
Just in support of Councillor Overton, the issue here is there's going to be a large industrial site in open countryside, and the issue is the reason for the recommendation is that it's policy W5. Now the issue then hangs on what do you, because I think we'd all be sat here if it said, oh, it's just for the farmer or for several farmers around about. I think that would be a no-brainer, because I think, well, certainly I do. I think most people here are very supportive of this this technology, but we're not saying that, are we? Because we're saying, all right, it won't be 50 miles, it could be 30 miles. So I think we don't seem to have a policy now, or even an emerging policy for these anaerobic digesters. So I think there is an issue that we're saying, well, as I've said before, as it stands, it seems to me, because somebody says, well, it's an AD plant, it's a bit like, solar farms and pylons. Oh, it's all, this overrides everything. Locals can just lump it because it's for the greater good. So I do think that I have a real problem now, because I was very, supportive of it, but I do think it comes back to the fact what is for 30-mile radius of Spalding, which is where, as we all know, is a massive producer of food waste of all sorts. Are we saying there's nowhere more suitable in the whole of Spalding for this site, or is it just free? It's free agent. So I do have a problem with this.
From a planning procedures perspective, there's only a requirement to start thinking about alternatives if the actual proposal that's being looked at is deemed to be unacceptable. And from our perspective, we don't consider it is unacceptable in terms of planning terms. So I suppose the connection that it has to the local area is the digestate that would be spread on the farmland. So if it was, as suggested, put on an industrial estate, then it loses that connectivity in terms of spreading the digestate. So from a planning perspective, there's no need to start looking at alternative sites. There might be a better location, but you only start to look at that if it's decided that the site in question is unacceptable from a planning perspective, from a planning policy perspective, and for the reasons set out in the report, the officers don't consider there is that conflict with planning policy, so therefore there isn't a need to start looking at alternatives.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whittaker, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought I'd pick my master computer up and just see if we can get an answer to a lot of these questions. An AI says, Greater Lincolnshire is a massive agricultural powerhouse housing over 90 large food chain businesses and hundreds of food-related companies, because the region produces about 12% of England's food. Food manufacturing acts as a primary economic driver across multiple specialist hubs rather than a single location. South Lincolnshire, Holbeach and Spalding, the UK's capital for fresh produce, prepared meals and vegetable processing, this hub directly supports over 50 food manufacturing sites and represents the heart of the UK food valley. I think that answers everybody's question. Where is the waste going from? From those factories. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I do have a question. Where is the farmer putting all the waste that they're currently producing? Is it just being left and spread back on the land and letting it decompose naturally, or is it being transported further and further afield to be disposed of separately? Do we know the answer at all?
Well, I suppose in terms of what's proposed from this development, there isn't any digestate at the moment because that digestate doesn't exist. It's going to be brought, it's going to be as a result of this process. So I think one of the ideas of digestate is it replaces fertiliser, so it's seen as a product rather than a waste. So that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to it. I mean, I think I'm satisfied with what I've heard, that this waste, the byproducts, they're going further afield. This is now, we've got something we can do with it, and it will enable us to be able to produce our own fertilisers without having to import it. It brings it closer to the farms where they're needed. And I understand the comment about the CO2, but we're not producing any more CO2 as we found before. The CO2 was always going to be produced. It's just now we're going to be able to liquefy it and sell it. It was always going to be a byproduct. Regardless of what happens to the waste, it was always going to be produced. So it's not an additional CO2 procedure as we found before. It's always going to be produced. It's just now we can do something with it. I think if there's no further questions, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation for approval. Have you, and with the additional, with the additional update. So yes, I'm happy to move it. Councillor Overton.
Thank you. Are you adding the condition that was mentioned earlier with no outside storage of materials? There are some tanks there, and that would be the place to store things. Just on the connection with the land, the digestate is a small proportion. The digestion that comes out is a small proportion of the vegetable waste that goes in. So I still think it should be on an industrial area. Thank you. Close to the industry. Thanks.
I think we've been proposed. Are we going to have a seconder, please? Councillor Redfern, thank you.
And that is with the additional condition that was mentioned. Yeah, just made that. Councillor Redford, are you happy to second with the additional condition? It's a verification of condition 21. Perfect. We will take that to a vote. It's now been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? And any abstentions? Thank you. That motion has been carried. We'll now move over to item 6.1, which is a report on section 37, consultation by National Grid Energy Transmission plc for overhead line works to the existing 400 kilovolt 2 WS and 47M lines in the vicinity of the Spalding T-Point, Surfleet Seas End and Moulton Seas End. The report recommendation is that the Council informs National Grid that objections are raised to these notifications. When National Grid submit the application to the Secretary of State, the Council objection to the application is noted, and that due to these objections, the Secretary of State should hold a public inquiry into these applications. This public inquiry needs to assess the environmental impact of the proposed work and the impact of the distribution due to extended time of construction works arising from these applications on local communities. I would like to invite Neil McBride, Head of Planning, to introduce the report. Over to you, Neil.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning again, councillors. So I think the Chairman's sort of set out largely in summary to what these applications are about. I'll just re-emphasise a little bit about this because it's unusual for this planning committee, because obviously we normally deal with applications where the committee is making the decision on the application. For this particular proposal, it will eventually be made by the Secretary of State. So just to give you some background, these applications are made pursuant to section 37 of the Electricity Act 1989, and where the Secretary of State is required to make a decision on the applications. National Grid, as the applicant, is required to, prior to submitting the applications to the Secretary of State, to obtain the views of the relevant planning authorities in whose area the proposed development would be situated. The County Council has received 2 separate Form B notifications from National Grid, the applicant. So this is a mechanism used to gather the relevant planning authorities' views on the proposals, and therefore those views will be submitted with the applications to the Secretary of State, who will need to take those into account when making the decision on these applications. So we just go to the first slide. So as you can see, the location, we're not that far away from the previous item, just to the north of Spalding. So the actual area covered by the applications is shown in red on the slide, and you can see that it is quite an extensive area. It largely covers areas of existing pylons and overhead lines, together with the areas which would be covered by the proposed construction, vehicular access, and also, as you'll see in the report, there's reference to a substation as well, which is also situated within that red line area, although that's not in front of this committee to consider. That will be subject to the separate applications to South Holland District Council to consider. So it just gives you a location. We're just to the, most of the activity would be to the east of the River Welland, as you can see on that first slide. Next slide, please. So this brings us slightly closer to the main area of the works. So the sort of the block that's outlined in blue in the centre of the plan, or just towards the bottom, that's the location of the proposed substation, which I say would be submitted. The application for that would be submitted to South Holland District Council in due course. So what's being looked at in these applications is the overhead lines and pylons that will be needed to link that proposed substation to the existing overhead lines and pylons. So it's split into two different applications, and that just gives a context to the works. Next slide, please. This shows the area beyond the overhead lines and pylons, which is the necessary construction access track which would lead to Stonegate, and where there'll be a access constructed onto Stonegate. And also you'll see there that there's some red line around Stonegate itself, because there would be some associated highway works to improve Stonegate to make it acceptable to facilitate the type of vehicles that would be necessary to bring the construction materials to site. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there are two separate applications. One largely relates to the overhead lines and pylons, which will be connecting to the existing pylons and overhead lines to the northeast, and that's this particular part of the project. So those bits in purple are the overhead lines that would be connected. Next slide, please. Again, this just shows the construction access track which would be required to facilitate that. Next slide, please. And this is the second application, which is to connect the overhead lines, or the substation, to the overhead lines to the southeast. And again, you can see on that plan in yellow, which is the additional overhead lines and pylons that would be required. Next slide, please. And again, similar in terms of for the previous application, the construction access track would be the same in terms of the necessary connection to Stonegate and the works that would be required. Next slide, please. And then finally, just in case you don't recall what overhead lines and pylons look like, this is the pylons and overhead lines which the lines would be connected to. So this is the ones to the north. Next slide, please. And this is the ones to the sort of southeast. So it's just to give you an idea of also the general flat landscape as to where these proposals are situated. So if I can just take you to the report. So the first 4 or 5 paragraphs provide some background as to why this particular proposal is being brought forward. You'll see in the committee report there's reference to the Grimsby to Walpole nationally significant infrastructure project, which is for overhead lines and pylons, which is proposed to largely cover the sort of go down the eastern side of the county. But you'll see in the report that it's been deemed necessary to bring some of those works forward, particularly in this location, so that a connection for the Outer Dowsing offshore wind project, which was granted consent by the Secretary of State earlier this year, has a connection date of 2030. The wider works associated with the Grimsby to Walpole NSIP won't be completed until 2033. So for that reason, National Grid are proposing to undertake the works associated with these proposals to enable that connection to take place prior to the wider overhead lines and pylons project, should that get consent. So the report also sets out the background and procedures to the Section 37 process, so I won't go into detail around that. The report sets out the detailed construction works and what is required for this project or for these projects, and also provides a summary of the environmental summary report that the applicant has submitted to support both of these proposals. Section 5, or paragraph 5, sets out the consultation responses that have been received, which includes objections from Western Parish Council, the Environment Agency, the Council's own historic places specialists, and also from the County Councillor's Highway Authority. Also at paragraph 5.3, it sets out the objections that have been received as a result of the publicity that has been undertaken for these proposals in the local area and the local community. Section 6 sets out the conclusions to the report. At paragraph 6.9, as you'll see, this concerns have been set out that if these proposals go ahead ahead of the main sort of works associated with the wider Grimsby to Warpole project, there's a prospect that these communities will, in possibility, experience over 6 years of disruption. So the intention would be that these works would potentially start in 2027, and the wider Grimsby to Warpole works would start in 2029 to 2033. But there is a real prospect that this particular community could suffer construction activities for a period of 6 years. The report sets out that given that the Outer Dowsing project has now indicated that they will not start construction activities until early 2028, and that has a 3.5 to 4 year construction programme. So there is every prospect that Outer Dowsing won't require their connection until 2032. So again, it does question some of the justification for why these accelerated works have been brought forward. And the second area of concern to the council or to your officers is the incomplete information that has been submitted at this time. The ecological survey, the ecological report at the time it was submitted was still subject to some survey work that hadn't actually been undertaken at that time. So that wasn't able to be included in the documentation. The transport assessment hadn't been undertaken, so there was no detailed information about the number of vehicle movements associated with the construction works. So together with some other deficiencies in the information that had been submitted with the report, your officers have felt that it's not been possible to say whether the impact of these proposals would be acceptable or not, or indeed whether there would be conditions that could be imposed to make those impacts acceptable. So the reasons for that have led us to recommend that there is an objection raised to these proposals, subject to the two reasons set out in the recommendation part of the report. And thirdly, that in light of these objections, the Secretary of State is requested to hold an inquiry, a public inquiry, to look at these matters in further detail, so that some of these inconsistencies and deficiencies that have been identified could be available to the Council to report into that public inquiry. And just finally, Chairman, just to confirm that in the update that was circulated on Friday, the applicant has provided some responses in relation to the deficiencies that have been identified by the Council in relation to the various sort of environmental technical reports, and also responding to some objections that have been raised from the Environment Agency, Historic England, Natural England, and some others. So your officer's view is, despite those assurances that this information will be available in the applications that have been submitted to the Secretary of State, that information is not available to the Council at this time, and therefore the Council is not able to provide any meaningful comments in relation to these projects. And just finally, it wasn't included in the update. I was notified by National Grid over the weekend that they have received emails from Natural England and the Wildlife Trust to say that they are now largely satisfied with the information that's going to be submitted with the applications to the Secretary of State. But again, that's not information that we've seen and been able to make an assessment on. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your presentation. We have one registered speaker, Craig Rivet from National Grid, to speak in support of the item. You will have 3 minutes to address the committee with a warning at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and that will start when you begin talking. Please come to the front, make yourself comfortable, press the microphone and go for it.
Thank you, Chairman, members of committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. The works before you are to reconfigure existing overhead lines enabling the early delivery of Weston Marsh A substation. These works would remove 4 existing pylons and introduce a net increase of 3. Members have heard concerns about timing and prematurity. The reason for these works is to connect the already consented Outer Dowsing offshore wind farm to the national grid. This wind farm is contractually required to be operational by 2030. Without these early connection works and the separate substation application to South Holland District Council, its electricity will not connect to the homes and businesses that need it. The Section 37 process is the only timely mechanism to consent to the works, as planning legislation does not allow these to be included within the substation application. Delaying this connection would result in Lincolnshire hosting a wind farm that is unable to be turned on. This would increase constraint payments, a cost that is ultimately passed on to all consumers. Our investment in the grid, the Great Grid Upgrade, overall seeks to avoid 12 billion of such costs to bill payers. If the wider Grimsby to Walpole project were not consented, these works and substation would still be required. The report has raised concerns about environmental information. The Section 37 process does not avoid scrutiny. Further surveys, a habitats regulations assessment, flood risk, transport and archaeological information will all be provided to the Secretary of State, with impacts controlled through established conditions such as construction management, traffic control, soil protection and ecological mitigation plans as part of the application. The Environment Agency nor Natural England object in principle. Their comments point to matters that can be resolved through the application of conditions. For clarity, Chairman and Committee, you're not being asked to determine the forthcoming Weston Marsh A substation planning application, nor the Grimsby to Walpole DCO application. You're being asked to consider whether these very specific overhead line modifications in this very specific location are acceptable in principle under Section 37 of the Electricity Act. Objection would not prevent the infrastructure from being required. It would introduce delay and uncertainty where impacts can instead be controlled through the Section 37 decision-making process. For those reasons, committee are asked to support the application, recognise that matters identified can be dealt with by further information and enforceable conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please do not move, because I'm sure, myself included, have got a lot of clarification questions to ask. I will start off with one question. You said that the connection has to be facilitated for 2030 for the Outer Dowsing project. Who gave Outer Dowsing that specific date without having any infrastructure in place?
Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman, for that question. If you don't mind, I'll answer speaking to the mic. Otherwise, I'll people not be able to hear. So, National Grid does not generate electricity. So, National Grid is required to then provide connections to those that have a connection agreement, and those connections are provided by the National Energy Systems Operator.
Right, and they gave the date of 2030?
Yes.
But you're not ready for 2030?
We believe that through this consenting process, we would be able to get that contracted connection ready in time and avoid constraint payments for bill payers.
Wonderful. And one final before I do open it up to everybody. Is Outer Dowsing able to connect to the grid just with the pylons, or do you need the facility to the planning permission of the substation to also go ahead before the Outer Dowsing can connect to the grid?
Absolutely correct, Chairman. We require both permissions.
Wonderful. I will open it up to the chamber. Councillor Hill.
So if the Grimsby to Walpole scheme is not granted permission, do you actually need to do this work? if it wasn't ground permission, which means the whole thing would fall. So from your perspective as an operator, would you actually need to do this work?
Yes, Outer Dowsing have a contractual agreement to connect to the grid. Separate to Grimsby to Walpole, we are obligated as National Grid to provide that connection, so that's what drives the requirement for both the Section 37 and the TCPA, if it wasn't to be picked up via the DCO.
Secondly, we don't normally, as a planning authority, get involved with commercial issues. So, frankly, and it's not your problem, we've got a irresponsible policy from the government which is trying to rush through even those people who support going to net zero or trying to get somewhere near it. Would most sensible people agree that artificial and foolish rush to have things in place by 2030 is not sensible. So I mean, come back to commercial issues aren't no, it's not your fault. You're stuck with a big problem, but in terms of planning, that's not our issue.
Not sure that there's a question, but I understand the comment, and thank you for those. Yes, as a position, National Grid is agnostic as to the generation of the country. Should the government make decisions to whether that be electricity supplied via nuclear or offshore wind or whatever those are, our obligation sits at connecting that generation to the grid.
I could have a long discussion with you about cables under the sea, but we won't go there. But I'm still not convinced that if Grimsby to Walpole doesn't happen, and it is possible, we could have a different government of a different flavour who might be. I'm not sure with all the investment that's gone on that it's possible to get out of this. But I'm still not convinced. If that wasn't happening, well, let me put it another way. If the Walpole to Grimsby application failed and stopped for whatever reason, would you be proposing exactly what you're proposing now?
I think I would go back to the connection that Outer Dowsing has is a legal agreement, and we are bound to then make that happen. Grimsby to Walpole is a way with which to make that happen. However, due to the time constraints as has been set out, that needs to happen by 2030, and so we must act to seek to achieve that connection by 2030.
But obviously there'll be because of the subsidy arrangements, there'll be massive. The wind farm operators will get massive. Not your issue. Will be paid not to provide electricity. I'm assuming the contractual arrangement is the case. So you'll have a greater scandal in terms of wind farms being paid not to produce electricity. So the issue is that for you as an operator, that's not an issue. So I see we seem to be confident. I mean, I fully do, for your information, support the recommendations in the main. The commercial issue is not our problem. It's not your problem. The taxpayer will be the poor old person people who will have to do this if you can't get this connection.
Bill payers ultimately will pick up constraint costs, and the Great Grid upgrade, Grimsby to Walpole, is part of a number of upgrades across the country that seeks to avoid constraint payments landing on bills. The current business plan for National Grid forecasts that, without the likes of the Great Grid upgrade, that could increase to £12 billion.
But who pays the constraint payment? It's not National Grid, is it? Or is it?
No, ultimately that would be bill payers.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Bowles, then Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm very disappointed with this, that we're faced with proposing a recommendation to object, both as a council, and I'm personally disappointed that I will... Sounds wrong, doesn't it? I'm disappointed that I am going to have to support that, because in principle, of everything you've just said, I've got no real issues in terms of the project. My problem is, I'm here to make decisions informed on the facts with the evidence in front of me, and we don't have that, and I don't think that's acceptable. So I would like an explanation about why you think it is acceptable to put the council in the position to have to do this, and us as members to not be able to fully represent our residents because we don't have all the facts and evidence before us on such an important issue.
Thank you for that question. As you'll have heard from officers, you know, that the work to get this done is being proceeded as fast as National Grid can do and as thoroughly as possible. It's regrettable that all those reports weren't available in time for you to consider. Those are being produced and will be supplied to the Secretary of State. Importantly for you, a decision, as was made by the officer at the beginning of the opening of this item, is that you're not being asked to make a decision on the application, but to make recommendations to the Secretary of State. So I certainly hear and understand those frustrations, but reassure you that we intend thoroughly to make sure that that information is provided to the Secretary of State and that conditions can be made such that we can protect local residents accordingly.
Just come back on that, Chair, if I can. I understand what you're saying, that documentation will be provided with the Secretary of State, but that is taking out a whole layer of representation. That local representation, whilst we can make representations to the Secretary of State, that is what our role is as a county council, to represent those local issues. And we're being cut out of that process because the information is not before us, and I don't think it's acceptable.
Thank you for those comments. I think what I would add to that is, importantly, is that the Secretary of State can revert to local authorities once that information has been provided. So we'll be able to then ask views of the local authority from that new information that's been provided. Also, I'd provide reassurance that the scheme, you know, was consulted upon in November, so we provided as much information as we could then. So communities, we seek to keep them updated. We seek to provide as much information as we can. We were very clear during the summer last year that we unfortunately weren't in a position with which to share the detailed proposals at Western Marsh. We committed to come out and provide further information, and that was what we then did in November.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Overton.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Thank you, Craig, for this presentation, taking questions. Returning to the report 2.10, the timeline. The timeline of the construction is clearly laid out here. We know that's quite a lot of disruption for the area local residents. Is this the maximum timeline? Does that take into account adverse weather conditions, rain and wind? For example, I know this area, and from memory, it rained for the every day for the first 3 months this year. That area was underwater quite a bit. Is the equipment that you have, or the operator have, to deal with that adverse weather conditions, which we know takes place over a number of winters? Just a comment on that. Is that the maximum timeline, or could that be extended even further? Thank you.
Unfortunately, and without speaking to engineering colleagues, I wouldn't be able to say that, you know, the level of pressure that's perhaps exerted within the report. It sets out that we believe that 33 months would be required. Speaking to the ground conditions, we have a dedicated lands team that goes out and does ground investigations such that we can make sure that we are appropriate, whether that be, you know, too wet, too dry, those sorts of things. So, you know, we'll make sure that our actions are appropriate, that we've got the lands team that goes out and does surveys. So at this stage, I'd only be able to say that we currently believe that to be 33 months. 27 months, specifically for the Section 37 works.
Thank you. Councillor Overton, please.
Thank you very much. I've got 3 questions, but can I just ask first, Craig, I didn't catch your surname and what your role is. Are you a director, or are you a planner, or where are you in the organisation? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm Craig Rivett. I'm the External Affairs Manager.
That's great, thank you. The speed of operation obviously has to fit the budget of your organisation, and you've not managed to get the material to us in time today. Presumably that's resources. So I'm thinking that, is there a sense in saying to the government, you can only do it at this rate, and therefore, you know, this one or the other one, whichever you're looking at, has to be delayed into the next programme?
Thank you for that, Councillor. The delay would result in not being able to connect out of Dowsing to the grid in time. Their contracted connection is 2030, as has been set out in the reports. Grimsby to Walpole wouldn't be due to be completed until 2033. You know, as has been discussed with Councillor Hill to delay until the DCO would incur costs.
You did say about recommendations to the inspector, but in order for us to make recommendations, we do need the information. And if you've seen some of the other papers that this council has submitted to the inspector, you'd be very impressed. You know, they're very thorough, they cover the whole range of issues, and that's what we have the expertise to do and would be able to contribute significantly given the opportunity. I think the last thing is about the grid capacity. You're expecting to be able to get this very significant amount of energy in and make some upgrades. How convinced are you that people are not going to be asked to turn off their roof solar panels in order to allow this international money to be made? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The national grid on a second-by-second basis is managed by the National Energy Systems Operator. The other piece of work that they undertake is future energy scenarios, and what that forecasts is future demand and supply, and from that then comes the asks of the likes of National Grid as to, you know, how we can reinforce the network. So as I sit here before you today, I'm representing National Grid Electricity Transmission, which is the high voltage line. Some of the things you're speaking about, perhaps residential solar power, is more to your, what they call the DNO, your local distribution, the lower voltages. But they will equally have business plans and investments that are required because homes, businesses will need that electricity. And so just to quickly summarise, from, you know, it goes from generation, gets stepped up to high voltage, which is National Grid Electricity Transmission, and then get it down to the distribution network, which then goes into homes and businesses.
So does your line get full?
Does our line get full? Yes.
Is there an endless amount of power that you can carry? I know you said it's high, but I mean, presumably that also could get full. There's no, you don't have to complicate the issue with homes or different kinds of lines. I mean, the line can get full, presumably, and then somebody will have to turn it off. Thank you.
The Great Grid Upgrade is building ahead to prevent those sorts of things happening. The country has a very good reliability. I think it's called the 6 nines, 99.9999% reliability. And that comes from the grid being able to move electricity around and react to both supply and demand. The Great Grid Upgrade seeks to address the increased forecast demand has been identified by the National Energy Systems Operator, and that's where the justifications for things such as Grimsby to Walpole, Northampton to High Marnham, the whole suite of grid upgrades that are being asked of us. But just to say, there are also, and I won't stray too far into engineering because I'm certainly not one of those, but from a regulatory perspective, we are governed by the SQSS, which is about the requirements of operating the grid safely and to standard. So, you know, for example, it must operate within a certain frequency, and you may well recall, members, from last summer, the blackout that happened in Portugal because the frequency was an issue.
Absolutely, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Redfern, then Councillor Murray. Councillor Murray, please.
Thank you, Chair. The other day I was reading about something that made me think that in Lincolnshire some things never change. In the mid-19th century, the MP for Lincoln was called Colonel Sibthorpe, and he vehemently opposed the railway development in Lincolnshire. That partly explains why Newark is on the East Coast Main Line and Lincoln isn't. For me, this is part of the future energy security of not only Lincolnshire but the country. And we need clean, renewable energy, and this is part of it. At the moment, as we all know, particularly at the moment, Britain's vulnerable to big increases in energy prices because of wars in other countries and started by dictators. I happen to live in Navenby, and on the way to Navenby, if you go down the road there, you see loads of pylons. Nobody thinks about them because they've been there for many years. The pylons are not monsters, and what they do is carry electricity. So, this, for me, is the way forward for cleaner, reliable energy for the future for Lincolnshire and for Britain.
Thank you. Did you want to reply to that?
I was going to say, thank you, Councillor, for those. You're quite right. Much of the Great Grid Upgrade is about connecting more secure homegrown electricity to the grid, and many will remember the choice that many made previous winters ago between heating and eating. With generation coming online, it would be a terrible situation with which to see many of these generations being created but not being able to move to the homes and businesses that need it. And it's reconfigurations such as this Section 37 and other projects that will enable communities, residents to get that electricity.
Thank you. I think the bit that really sticks with me is the fact that someone's made a promise that they can have a connection in 2030 without actually having the infrastructure in place to do that. And what you're saying is, I mean, Out-of-Dowsing have confirmed that they're going to delay it. And what you're saying is that we need to have these pylons put in quickly so that when we do have the application comes through to South Holland regarding the substation, which is required for the Out-of-Dowsing, then you've already got the pylons there. But as the officers have stated, this is going to be a very long period of time. If we start processing and putting in pylons before we actually get permission for something, the roads are very narrow in the area. Not even cars can pass, and they have dikes and ditches either side. So there's a lot of work that needs to be put in place even before we start looking at erecting new and dismantling old pylons. And I think it is only right that the public do have an inquiry and be able to see all the details put for them. I appreciate you say that these documents are going to be ready for the Secretary of State, but why can't they be ready for us? You know, if it means delaying your application so that you can have these documents ready for us, what's in those documents that it sounds like you don't want us to read them and only the Secretary of State can read them, but we can read them afterwards or he can come back to us. I'm very, very mindful that we need to be very transparent with people when we are changing their landscape in such a massive way. And it's going to be a good number of years. 2033 is a long time away to be suffering from lorries and movements without having an inquiry and let people know what's going to happen to their area. And therefore, I'm very happy to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you. Sorry, I'm a bit for... Yes, sorry, we've asked so many questions of the poor gentleman. I have moved a little bit too quickly, but you can probably tell I'm not impressed. But Craig, please come back to me with your answers before I move on to the next bit.
So come on, thank you, Chairman. I feel like we're in debate, but it's a throwback to another time. You've raised many points there, Chairman, for which I shall endeavour to try and reassure you and answer your questions. So first of all, on the complexity, yes, the energy sector is incredibly complex. It does involve government policy, Ofgem from regulation, rightly protecting bill payers. Also, you've then got National Grid when it comes to then transmission. Then you've got the generators. So it is a very complex environment, and yes, it's not perfect. It's the environment with which we have. So it is regrettable that we've got the situation that we find ourselves. Of some comfort, I would say that connections reform is underway, with which to seek to get projects which are shovel-ready earlier to connect to the grid. On construction and disruption due to highways, I think there's two aspects there. Number one, I think it ties into the point about judicial review versus conditions. So with this works being able to be completed earlier, then evidently there will be an element of work which has been completed. That would then reduce the amount of work, whether it be workforce, materials, HGVs needing to go to and from site. This won't be a continuous high intensity in this area for a continued period of time. There will be ebbs and flows. During that construction period up to 2033, on the DCO, there would need to be a construction from Grimsby to Walpole. There won't be an intensive activity along the entirety of the route. And I think that then goes into the reassurances that you as a local authority would be able to take in that, of course, there's things such as the construction, transport and management plans and others documents which would suitably condition any of these aspects to ensure that residents are suitably protected and considered, along with any highways improvements such as passing places. Was that okay, Chairman?
It was. I've joined you to the committee. I think that your replies are excellent as usual, and it's very kind of you to be able to answer such complex questions, and so we do appreciate it. Councillor Hill.
I mean, Craig is very impressive, you know. I mean, you did sort of imply that we've got to go around this or the lights will start going out, which... so the question is, if you stayed as you are until 2033 on the current arrangements or the current structures, are you saying the lights would start going out?
It would be far from me to represent NISO at this planning committee. I'm but a humble external affairs manager for this project. What I'm saying is that more importantly, this wouldn't be a big bang kind of moment.
No, that's, just answer the question, please.
Yeah, constraint costs will be building.
No, that's,
so, but
no, that's not the question. The question, because you said the lights will start going out. You weren't referring specifically to this project, I admit, but you did say we've got to get on with this. But my question is, if grid just carried on as it is, doing its best, would the lights go out by 2033?
I would not suggest that the lights are going out by 2033.
Thank you.
Is there any further questions? In which case, Craig, you may leave the hot seat and we'll carry on the rest of the debate. Are there any questions for the main debate of officers? Councillor Hill.
Support. I think it's eminently reasonable that there is a public inquiry. This is a massive issue for the locality, and of course needs to be more detail. And the arguments really being made are of a commercial nature. The only thing is on recommendation 1, which I'm just hurriedly trying to find, it said the reasons for this are accepted. I think it's the first line of the recommendation, if I can just find it. Yeah. Whilst it is accepted by the council that a need for the proposed electricity infrastructure has been proven, the timing becomes the issue. I'm a bit concerned about that statement because and again, are we talking about the specific issue of the outer dowsing? Because I do think that's quite a dangerous statement. Well, obviously not if you have no problem with this, but I think it's quite a bold statement which will be referred to in other decisions that are made. So it's a recommendation as well. I am concerned about that because I think it will be taken out on other applications and used as evidence. Well, actually, the county council has accepted the need to that. I'm feeling that it's there because of the specific issue, but I just think it needs to be reworded at the very least. Because I certainly don't accept the need for it, and I could have a big debate with Craig later, but I think I'll probably have lunch instead.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. So, yes, in terms of the wording, it is going to the micro scale of things, so it is for the outer dowsing project. So we're not suggesting that the wider need has been proven, but for outer dowsing, clearly there is a connection agreement that's in place. The outer dowsing project has now got consent, so for those two reasons, that's why we're focusing on the outer dowsing. So maybe if we sort of reword it to make it clear that it only relates to outer dowsing rather than electricity generally. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Wimhurst was next.
So, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say, yeah, I completely agree with you, Chairman, there, and I also agree with Councillor Hill. We should really be sending this off for the inquiry on it. But yeah, like I said, most of my questions have already been asked. So if you do need someone to second your motion from earlier, Chair, then...
It's fine. I was a bit early with the moving of it, but we've, I think there is some additional wording that will need to be moved, put forward before we go to moving. But yes, it was lunchtime, Councillor Hill, and I I was a bit too gung-ho. Who's next, please?
Councillor Taylor? Yep.
Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chairman, much appreciated. As we know, the future energy needs of this country is a major issue, major national debate at the moment. I do support this recommendation. We do need to hold that public inquiry and comment series assess the environmental impact. That does need to be taken very seriously. We've seen the local objections there, parish councils, and comments on this council. We do hear, just a few comments on the language, we hear the word great grid upgrade mentioned in the report about a speaker. I mean, referring to that word great, not great if you live close by, not great if you are upset or distressed by this, it's having some emotional impact on local residents, and not great when this could change the environment forever. So we do need to watch the language that is used, I believe, because it is, we know, creating some stress and upset for people that live nearby. As I said when I asked the question, I do know this area. There's also some tourism that takes place there. There's some, as a campsite there. It's also used by cyclists. May not be footpaths, but the cyclists that use this road, and additional vehicle movements, but including HGVs, will have an impact on that particular leisure activity. So let's also consider that. It's an issue we do need to listen to all comments and concerns. This is the open rural landscape of South Lincolnshire, known for its big skies. We do need to consider the way technology are moving on in the future. There may be other ways of addressing these energy needs, but I do support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Overton.
Thank you very much. I also support the recommendations. I think it is important that we have a public inquiry, having just done two of them recently. I think it's astounding how much good information comes forward that can improve the application, even if it went through in the end. You know, it's really very productive. And I think looking at the point about industrialisation of the landscape, yes, and I agree with pylons on their own are not as intrusive as perhaps some of the other industrial developments that appear in the open countryside from time to time, as we had one application earlier. But nevertheless, it creates an opening for further industrialisation. You know, you do get applicants coming forward saying, well, you've already got those pylons, we'll just put this underneath, and then we'll put that with it, and then since we've got an energy, we'll add some more data centres or something, and the whole thing can become, you know, it can lead to an industrialisation. But we're only looking at the application in front of us and not seeing it as a precedent, because that's what we have to do on the planning committee. But nevertheless, you know, the open rural countryside that grows food is Lincolnshire. And that's something we really need to focus on with planning. So fully support. The point that came up earlier from Councillor Hill about the proven, I absolutely would like to support that. I mean, it's not up to us whether it's proven or not. You know, NESO's made their own decisions. We're not. That's the National Energy Operating System, or system operator. That's not us. That's not our responsibility. Anyway, so we don't need to say whether it's proven or not. We can say that we see their case. And that's probably enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other persons wishing to speak?
Neil, have we got some changing of wording just to take an account for Councillor Hill's comments, please?
Yeah, so thank you, Chairman. Just what I sort of put down here. So, whilst it is accepted by the Council that a need for proposed electricity infrastructure to connect the Outer Dowsing project has been proven, so put it in relation to Outer Dowsing. And also just noted in the next sentence, it says G to W. We probably ought to put Grimsby to Walpole there, because that doesn't make sense to people that don't know. So with those two corrections, I think that hopefully captures what Councillor Hill was asking for.
Councillor Hill.
Well, I just wonder why we need to actually even say, while it's accepted, can't we just go straight into the timing to bring it forward is inappropriate? I mean, why do we go there? Because again, I'm not an expert, but I'm still not convinced that it's necessary, the upgrade is necessary. It's obviously all around the connection of the Western Marsh to the outer dowsing, and I don't know here, and I'm not going to put Craig through the thing again, is whether they are mutually necessary. So why don't you start with the timing and not even go there? Because it's not really necessary, is it, Neil? You could just not bother with it and just go straight to the timing, bringing this application forward, etc., etc. And then that takes it all away.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the wish of the committee, then I think, you know, as officers, we felt there has been the justification for this connected to outer dowsing. But if it's felt, the committee feel that we don't need to actually make reference to that, then, you know, we'd be happy to start it at the timing, and then from there, and then put Grimsby to Walpole.
I'm with you on this one, Councillor Hill. And would you like to propose? I'll let Councillor Hill propose, and I gladly second. If there's no other comments, in that case, with the changes to the recommendation and being moved by Councillor Hill and seconded by myself, we'll take it to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Any abstentions? The recommendation has been carried. Thank you very much. We will now have a very quick 15-minute break. I will see you back in the chamber at 1:45, where we'll carry on with the traffic regulation orders. Thank you very much. We now move over to item number 7, which is the traffic items, where the committee will consider the reports and objections to the executive proposals for proposed traffic regulation orders and speed limit orders. Before we proceed to the main TRO business, I would like to welcome Tina Featherston, Programme Leader for Highways Maintenance. She'll be taking the lead on the traffic items before the committee today. Moving on to item 7.1. The first item is in Crowland, in Postland Road, proposed waiting restrictions. Over to you, Tina.
Thank you, Chairman. There were 4 objections received to this one, with the main concern that restrictions will adversely affect working parents who rely on their breakfast club. This is a school that we introduced mandatory restrictions at about 3 years ago now, and they've been successful. However, parking for breakfast club has since become a problem that's caused some concern at the school. Extending the restrictions for an hour in the morning will ensure that the area is kept clear of parked vehicles, and it'll help those attending the primary schools, but it'll also help the secondary school pupils as well who are in the area, because their bus stop is also in the vicinity. It is appreciated that for a few parents there'll be some inconvenience early in the morning. However, with unrestricted parking close by, it is recommended that the objections are overruled so the restrictions can be changed by just an hour in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman, do we have any questions?
Anyone wish to ask a question or speak?
I mean, I'm guessing that the original restrictions have been successful, and therefore that's why the additional hour has been requested, which means it is a success, and therefore I can see no reason why. I'm happy then to recommend the approval, and I'd like to propose that the committee notes the contents of the reports and of the proposed traffic regulation order detailed in Appendix 8 has given due regard to the objections received as detailed in the report, and recommends to the Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport to support the proposed order. Could I have a seconder, please?
Councillor Woodruff.
Thank you very much. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And for formality, those against, any abstentions? That has been passed. Thank you very much. Moving on to next item, which is 7.2, and that's in Hurlby Main Road, proposed bus stop clearway. Over to you, Tina.
Thank you. There is just one objection to this proposal. We have tried alternative locations, but we get the same objection just from different residents. This bus route is the main coastal route from Lincoln. It also serves the local residents. Main Road itself doesn't have any restrictions, so the combination of off-street and on-street parking should be sufficient to meet the needs of residents. So again, it's recommended that the objection is overruled. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman, do we have any comments or questions?
No comments or questions, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Having looked at this one, it is a established bus stop that's already there. The only thing missing is the actual paint on the road. So as it's been a well-established bus stop, I'm therefore happy to recommend for approval, and I would like to propose that the committee notes the contents of the report, and the proposed traffic regulation order detailed in Appendix A has been given due regard to the objections received as detailed in the report, and recommends to the Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport to support the proposed order. Seconder is Councillor Whitaker. Can we take that to the vote? All those in favour, please raise your hand. For formality, those against, any abstentions? The recommendation has been carried. We're now over to item 7.3 in Lincoln is Newport, proposed waiting restrictions. Over to you, Tina.
Thank you. Again, we have just one objection for this one. It's a fairly standard access restriction, similar to what we might install at a junction to maintain visibility. This one has the added concern of a pedestrian refuge close by. The proposed restriction will allow safe exit from the car park and ensure users of the pedestrian refuge can be seen. It'll also help the gritters get through, and obviously the emergency services too. So again, it's recommended that the objection is overruled so that the restrictions can be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman, do we have any questions or comments?
Yes, Councillor Murray, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is adjacent to my division and I know it really well, and I would move that we accept the recommendation.
No other speakers.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Completely concur with yourself on that one. It has, looking on the street view of it, the parked cars do obscure the visibility, and we need to keep everybody safe, and it is a very small area. Therefore, Councillor Murray has proposed that the committee notes the contents of the report and proposed traffic regulation orders as detailed in Appendix A, have given due regard to the objections received as detailed in the report, and recommends to the Executive Council for Highways and Transport that the proposed order be approved. I'll gladly second that. All those in favour, please raise your hand. For formality, those against? Any abstentions? That has been carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 7.4, in Pinchbeck, Knight Street, proposed no waiting at any time. Over to you, Tina.
Thank you. This one received 7 objections, and along with 3 expressions of support, with some of the objectors also acknowledging that something needed to be done. I need to make it clear to the committee that the private off-street parking in green on the plan belongs to the respective businesses and is not available for residential use. It is only available to customers using that business. Also, deliveries for the businesses can still take place on the proposed double yellow lines. This is a Class B road, and as a primary route from Bourne to Pitchbeck, there is an expectation that the route will remain available to all classes of vehicle, and it is well used by HGVs and agricultural vehicles along with buses. All of these vehicles have been witnessed mounting the pavement to resolve the gridlock that occurs due to the parked cars, and there are some photos on the next slide, please, Andrew. It is appreciated that there will be a loss of parking for a small number of residents who do not have their own off-street parking. However, given the danger to all road users, it is recommended that the objections are overruled so the restrictions can be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Chairman, do we have any comments or questions before I start? Councillor Sam.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm very much familiar with that area, and I fully support the proposed parking restriction on Knight Street because the current parking situations create serious visibility and congestion issues, particularly for larger vehicle navigating in the bend in the roads. So certainly keeping the carriageway clear will improve the traffic flow and reduce the risk of gridlock and enhance safety for both driver and pedestrians. So I fully support this proposal. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Hill.
Just the existing is any time waiting, or that's no waiting at any time?
Yeah, it's no waiting at any time, so it's a 24-hour restriction.
So are there any houses on there which have no access to vehicular parking?
Yes, there are a couple, and there is a very small area that has been left unrestricted outside the hairdressers, and I think it's a Chinese takeaway.
So what will they have to do then if they've got a vehicle?
They'll have to use the closest alternative parking in the surrounding streets.
Which is?
Off the top of my head. Can we have the plan back up? I might be able to.
How far would it be? You Spalding Heights can tell me.
So there's Bear Lane, Church Street, and then I can't quite read the other one. And then the small gap is just in the middle.
Sorry, right, and the houses without off-street park or without drives or whatever, where are they? Which
They're
end?
closer to Bear Lane.
They're at Bear Lane end?
Yeah.
I see.
Okay. Having been brought up in the area, because it's literally, it's the closest village to where my parents live, Knight Street has always been a challenge because it is the main route between Spalding and Bourne. And there has always been parked cars, and there's always been, times where it's very hard to get through. However, I have noted that in 2023, before this committee, before myself, there was a lot of restrictions being put on the local areas, such as Forge Crescent, Westfield Drive and Fennell Road, as a way of relieving parked cars around the school. As we all know, the moment you put double yellows anywhere, you just push the problem elsewhere. And unfortunately, that has pushed this problem to Knight Street, where constantly in the morning with parents now having to park on the main road, causing more congestion and more difficulties. I can see that if we approve this one, Knight Street has already been halved. What you don't see on the photos, the other half of it has already got restrictions with bus stops and removed some of the parking that the local businesses use, such as the butchers and the convenience store, the Spa. So now all those parked cars are having to move to the other end of Knight Street, which is now we're looking at today, putting more restrictions on. That's going to push that to then Bear Lane and to probably Church Street, to which case we'll have then come back again and be told that there is not enough parking and there's going to be restrictions. And I think at some point as a committee we need to look and see, you know, we all know that if we put double yellows in places that it's going to restrict. Now the restrictions in other areas are at all times as well, which means that visitors to those residents are having to find elsewhere. I wish there was a very simple solution to Pinchbeck's problem with parked cars and HGVs and tractors and any other vehicle that needs to travel through the village. The locals do use Rotten Row and Rose Lane to avoid the centre, but my fear is that if we double yellow majority of Knight Street, you're going to remove all visitors to the local businesses. We have 2 Spa shops, a pharmacy, there is a nursery for the children, there is a school. There is a lot of businesses that rely on the ability for people to park outside, right outside those businesses, go and do their daily work and then come back out. Also, you have the people that actually work in them. You know, there was a report and there said there is 3 spaces outside the Spa shop. Well, if they employ 3 people, then there is no spaces, which, you know, and if they can't park locally. I do have grave concerns with this proposal, and I feel that I think what we have in front of us is a bit of a blanket, let's stop everybody, and that will solve it. It will solve it, but it won't help the village of Pinchbeck. And we don't want the village of Pinchbeck to suffer because people can't park. We need to have a bit of a better look at the entire area and see whether some additional parking can be made in the area for people that go to school, and see if there's anything more we can do to help relieve the traffic that goes through. And therefore I would like to propose to the committee that we either look at a modification or we withdraw it, and then it can come back to us with a different design and something that's a bit more representative. Councillor Hill.
I'd like to second that proposal. I mean, you're right, it's the route from Spalding, well, Pinchbeck end of Spalding, and of course, if you know, you start rat running around because you know there's going to be vehicles. And of course, the other thing which I haven't mentioned, if you remove parked cars, you increase the speeding problem. So I fully, because Pinchbeck is, if you're not, there's no, apart from the main road, they're all narrow little roads, aren't they? So I fully support. I would recommend that this is refused and come back with a more comprehensive, holistic approach to these issues in the area.
Tina, would you like to come back?
The idea of a part-time restriction was broached with the local member who was of the opinion that the restrictions needed to be 24 hours because in the hours of darkness, visibility was still an issue, just for the committee's information.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You made some very interesting comments there, and you made a proposal and Councillor seconded that. So, if I could second it, yes. I've used the word challenging. Well, that is correct. It's a difficult situation. I believe the officer mentioned there were some objections, but he also said something needs to be done. So we can all agree with that. And it's that balance, isn't it? Residents there, schools there, those local businesses need some support. It's so easy to buy online from the global giants at the moment and not support the local businesses. So they do need that support. But we don't want to make life a misery for those who live there or travelling through the area. And also the local Bull pub opens again very soon, which is good news because it's busy. It's busy in that area, and the busy road breathes life into a shopping area. So we don't want to kill it, but we don't want to make it dangerous. And what is the solution? We now need to make that solution which works, not the unintended consequences makes it worse. So it needs to be the correct answer. So I do probably support the recommendation. Let's sort of pause on this, look at objections, look at the area again, and maybe reconsult, put in place hopefully a solution we can agree with, or look at whether you mentioned, Chairman, those who work at the shop and where do they park, maybe look at a common sense solution so there's some free flow in traffic, also safety. So if Council's fine with this, I'm happy to support your recommendation and come back with a solution that actually works. A slight delay, but it may be worth a delay to get a system, a plan in place that works. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I believe Councillor Hill was the one that suggested withdrawing. Are you happy to propose that?
I propose we either withdraw or refuse. I don't know which is technically correct. I'll propose that then, Chairman.
Perfect. In that case, then, Councillor Hill has proposed that the committee note the contents of the report and the proposed traffic regulation orders detailed in Appendix A has given due regard to the objections received as detailed in the report and recommends to the Executive Council for Highways and Transport that the proposal be withdrawn. It has been seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That recommendation has been carried.
Is that a recommend to the portfolio holder, is it? How's that? Yeah.
That's correct, yes. The
recommend
executive.
that it's not supported or whatever.
And then we move over to the next item, which is 7.5 in Stamford, is back lane proposed no waiting at any time. Over to you, Tina.
Thank you. This one received 6 objections, and they were mainly from residents on Adelaide Street, whose garages at the rear of their properties are on back lane. They feel that the restrictions are unnecessary and disproportionate. Back lane residents have been experiencing difficulty accessing their off-street parking for some time, as they've needed to wait until the residents parking on Brownlow Street was finalised. And Brownlow Street is just next to Back Lane and Adelaide Street. It was hoped that these extra spaces might relieve the pressure on Back Lane, but this hasn't been the case, so they're still having trouble getting to and from their off-street parking. We do acknowledge that parking in the area is difficult for residents who need to park in front of their garages, but it is recommended that the objections are overruled so the restrictions can be implemented. You can see from the slide that the parking is generally difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Do we have any comments or questions?
Councillor Hill, please.
Well, I think it's a similar debate we've just had. I mean, actually, I know this area quite well, and it's a nightmare, to be honest. I mean, actually, I was actually dropping off some election literature for a candidate, and I couldn't believe how difficult. I mean, what's really annoying is this isn't that old, this area, but this is, you know, when these streets are designed, not like Pinchback where it's already there. This is a more recent. So I do think I have a lot of sympathy with the objectors, and I'm not sure it is it's chaos there because cars parked everywhere at the end, and you struggle to even turn round at times. But I'm not sure what the problem is we're trying to alleviate here. Is it vehicles can't get through, or so I wasn't quite clear.
If we go back to the photos, please, Andrew. So you see the white, I think it's a Mini, that's their private off-street parking. And the residents, I think their official address is Croft something. And they say they can't manoeuvre in and out of those spaces because of the cars that are parked at the garages.
Is it people, cause I had that problem because I literally was driving around trying to find, but I'm not sure, I'm not sure what problem stopping people parking on.
If the cars parked along the garages are removed, then they have room to get in and out of their spaces.
I see. But Well, it's the whole length of it you're proposing.
No, well, no, it would only go halfway down, but when you get to the other end of Back Lane, it's not wide enough for anything to park anyway. You can only get one car through at a time.
So if you go back to the photograph, how far up the...
see
which road is that we're looking? Is that Back Lane?
If you see the photo on the left-hand side, where the car in silver car, top right, that's about as far as it goes. And then after that, the road naturally narrows. So there are no restrictions proposed any
so
further.
So is that back on the right? That's Back Lane?
That's Back Lane, yes.
And the white Mini is the same Mini that...
Yeah.
Yep. And just remind me of the length of the proposal.
I don't have the exact meterage, but it's about halfway.
But does it have to be halfway to solve the problem of the garages? 'Cause you're not
Well, the garages go halfway across, so we'll cover all the garages.
Tina, just for clarification, the cars that are parked there on the left, outside the garages, we can only assume that they must own the garage, otherwise
Yes.
they're parking in front of someone else's,
Yes.
which would then would be even more of a
Yeah.
problem. But then again, there is no stopping that. If
No.
someone wanted to go and park in front of someone else's garage and leave their car all day, then they could just do that without this restriction.
Theoretically, the police could remove them for obstruction. However, we've had this discussion before.
Are the
haven't we?
garages actually used as garages? I suspect not.
I wouldn't be able to say definitively.
They're not very big garages, are they? By the look of them.
It's still the access to the garage. I mean, I have had a look at this and looked at how difficult it would be to pull out of your, if you've got parking on your premises and you cannot pull safely out with having a vehicle that's parked on the side of the road, then you can't exit your own driveway. Then that does become a problem. And as we just said, if someone wanted to use their garage and a vehicle has been parked there all day, could be left there for a week, you can't access your own property, then we've got a bit of a problem.
Similar problem to Pinchbeck. Well, where are they going to park? Because that whole area is a mess basically in terms of parking. Because you're on Wharf Road and you can't park. You can go on the public car park, but you've got to pay. So it's the same Pinchbeck.
It is, Councillor Hill, and welcome to planning. It's Councillor Overton.
Thank you. Is it just difficult to get out, or is it actually impossible to get out? Because I'm surprised they park there if they can't get out. So, I mean, if it's difficult and they just have to go forward and back a few times, well, that's manageable.
The people that are parked, they can get out, but it's the people that are parked in their own driveway may not have enough swing.
Really?
Looking at the photo that I've just seen, if you look at the Mini, if someone was parked next door to them or the next car, I believe when Tina did visit the site, they are parking, in front of garages. And although it can be parked there, I don't believe it is designated parking. It's just that you can park there.
As far as I'm aware, the cars that are parked in front of the garages belong to the garage owners. I've not had any reported difficulties of anyone blocking the garages. It is specifically those private parking spaces that are difficult for the residents to navigate.
Assuming the back garage is still big enough, I'm not sure, they could just park in their garage and hope,
Theoretically, yes.
hope nobody else parks.
Theoretically, yes.
Locks them in.
I mean, it is one of them. It is, yes, they park in front of the garages. Technically, they could put their own car in the garages, but then without double yellow lines in front of their garages, they could be blocked in their garages. And I think it is more down to, it's the request of the people that have a property with a driveway and they can't safely leave their driveway because of parked cars opposite. I think that is where we've got to look at as a committee, that are we,
The same issue, where will they be displaced to? And the whole of that area is a nightmare.
They could knock down their own garage and have off-road parking. If the garage isn't big enough, I think the problem is we're always trying to solve a problem, and we'll help one person and we won't help the other. On this front, though, because of the fact that they're blocking the garages, I think that I'm satisfied that having the double yellow lines there, the no waiting on that, would serve more help to the residents that actually have their driveways, that need to be able to swing out onto that road. and therefore the people that are parking there in front of their own garages could utilise their own garage.
So presumably we're allowed to deregulate. So if it's all chaos and the WA lines are causing worse problems, we could say remove them.
We could process another TRO, yes.
Yeah, to get
but obviously
rid of it.
if that would take
so on that basis,
time again.
let's see what happens, my view.
Councillor Redford.
Sorry, Chair. According to the map, you've got double yellows on both sides. Would there be a possibility of just putting them on one side? Would that alleviate the problem?
Yeah, like Councillor Hill's just said, it's very narrow, and the parking area behind the double yellow line is private, whereas the double yellow line will be on public highway. So then theoretically, people could still park on that side. So they need on double to keep the private clear.
If there's no further questions, then Councillor Bean.
Forgive me for stating the obvious, but I think this is a case of where the people that are parking in front of the garages need to use their garages. It's one of my pet hates that people have a parking space and they don't use it and take up space on the road instead. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy to move that we accept this recommendation.
Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you, Chair. Tina, the land opposite the garages, the other side of Back Lane, is that private land or is that county council land?
It's private. The off-street parking is private. It's not county council.
Oh, right. So, yeah, because if it's county council and you put a double yellow there, they still wouldn't be able to park the other side of it, would they?
No.
No, right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're giving it a good airing, and it has been moved by Councillor Bean to propose that the committee notes the contents of the report and the proposed traffic regulation order detailed in Appendix A has been given due regard to the objections received as detailed in the report, and recommends to the Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport that the proposal be approved. Looking for a second, Councillor Hill. Are you happy to second? If not, I'm happy to second. If not, I think we've got Councillor Whittaker has seconded it. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. That has been carried. And we move to the final item of the day, which is 7.6, which is Witham St Hughes, Hedge Lane, proposed weighting restrictions. Over to you, Tina.
Thank you. We had 3 objections to this one, with a number of residents getting in touch with us after the consultation to express their support. However, their comments are not included in the report as they were received too late. If we go to the photographs in the 3rd slide, cars are parking within the traffic calming chicane system right up to the give-way line. This means that when a bus or a car, for that matter, approaches the roundabout, it's already committed before anything coming the other way off the roundabout can see it. Cars have also been parking too close to the junction with Elder Close, so we propose some basic measures just to keep the junction clear. A small number of properties will be affected, however they do have some off-street parking at the rear of their properties that's available, so the recommendation is that the objections are overruled. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman, do we have any questions or comments, please?
Councillor Overton, please.
Thank you. This is my area. The Parish Council have been very perturbed, and I have also had a look myself, and it is, as you can see from the pictures, as you saw from the pictures, it's very dangerous because you showed one car parking right up to that junction, but sometimes there are 3 cars along there, and as you rightly said, if you're trying to overtake those cars coming up to that chicane or junction, then you are already on the wrong side of the road by the time traffic's coming towards you. So it is it has been raised by residents. They are very worried about that junction, that situation, and they find it very dangerous and difficult. So I also did ask about alternative parking, and they do have alternative parking, so that is a strong point. So I think I know there are, I see there are objections, but actually they are surmountable, and it's really important that we get this improvement. So I'm happy to propose. Thank you.
Councillor Bean.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this is another case of badly designed housing estates which don't meet the requirements of today's traffic loads, and also inconsiderate parking. So I'm happy to support this.
Thank you very much. Again, it's one of my pet hates, because you come around the corner and you think that they're waiting for you, and you then find out it's a parked car that's just parked in the road. And unfortunately, and there are instances where a lot of cars will park there, and you're faced with a bus or a lorry or an emergency service vehicle that has to overtake. And so I'm completely with you on this one, Councillor Overton. And with that, Councillor Overton has moved that the proposal that the committee notes the contents of the report and the proposed traffic regulation order detailed in Appendix A has been given due regard to the objections received as detailed in the report, and recommends to the Executive Council for Highways and Transport that the proposal be approved. Could I have a seconder, which is Councillor Bean? All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's everybody, but those against, any abstentions, that recommendation has been carried. And that now concludes the business of the meeting. Our next meeting will be scheduled for Monday, the 15th of June, 2026. Thank you for attending, and we close the meeting at 1:17. Thank you very much. Have a safe journey home.